That would be okay. Now we're live.
Ew.
Yeah, I wish we had a countdown when we could go live on that. That would be fantastic. How you doing?
Doing awesome, man. Yourself?
Doing well. So you're done with spring break. You're back into the saddle.
We
We have
are
spring break this. We have spring break now, and I've been doing a lot of traveling. I went to. I always forget where I'm at. I just got back from Wilmington, North Carolina. Went to a really big real estate award ceremony there. I got to speak and do some training, and then came back, and it just so happens that there was a regional event that I was going to speak at that everyone else flew in, and I actually got to be local because it was just up in Brea.
Oh, nice.
So, but what's interesting is the tariffs just went into effect.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this for a while in regards to the cheap money and the low interest rates and gold and silver and precious metals. So you and I are pretty much on the same page. And there was a lot of fear in the audience because I got to speak with agents. So I spoke in front of a large audience of agents, but then afterwards it was a consolidated group of broker owners, managers, leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And they're worried, high interest rates, high inflation, clear cooperation, like buyer agency. And I had to pause for a second. Normally I don't go into it when I'm at these leadership things, but two things I shared with them. I said, number one, guys, I said, look, your perception is your reality. And if you're looking at all these scenarios and you're painting this with a brush of doom and gloom, you're absolutely right. And I said, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying is that your perception is your reality. I said, you see, my reality is our industry, there's never been a time where it hasn't been challenging. Like I remember back in the 2010, 11, 2005, when the internet, when everybody thought that the internet was a fad. 2011, around that time, is when it hit the news that it was such a big deal that buyers and sellers are going to the internet at a higher percentage. It was like 51% of the people are actually using the internet to find their house. And it was a big deal because we were, internet's going to put us out of business. There's always something that's going to put us out of business.
Right.
And, the Great Recession, you and I did really, really well with what we pivoted on during the Great Recession. Not everybody did that. So what I was telling them is I'm like, look, guys, your perception's your reality. You're not wrong, but neither is the other person that is looking at it from a different lens. I said, you need to look at things. I said, everything that's going on has no meaning until you give it meaning. And I said, but as a leader, I said, you can't share this stuff with your leaders. You have got to be calm, cool, and collected, even if you are just going sideways on the inside. And you just have to be very deliberate and very focused.
Right.
Choose a direction and go. And if it turns out to be the wrong direction, readjust. So,
Right.
I was sharing that with them, and because I don't think that the world is ending. In fact, I think that with tariffs going up, I do think it'll affect real estate. But I also think that those who have taken time to recognize that technology, digital strategies, the internet's not a fad, I think they're the ones who've already done that, are going to be the benefactors of this change. And those who adopt now, it's not too late, but what are you seeing?
Yeah. It's interesting. I always, whenever you bring up stuff like that, it's like, it always reminds me of the quote from Walt Disney where he's like, I heard there was a recession. I'm choosing not to participate in it. And it's just like, okay, great. This is what we're dealing with. Time to adjust our sails and, pivot, iterate, whatever it is. But yeah, I don't. It's kind of surprising to me that that was kind of like the general sentiment, especially with rates coming down. I mean, that literally opened up. I think it was something close to like a million. It was like 700,000 to like a million people who were previously not eligible to qualify for a loan or are now able to be in the market. Like that's not a so helping affordability there for tons and tons of people. So yeah, man, it's interesting to see. I don't think I think on the at least on the mortgage side there was a lot of positive sentiment. I'm not in the same room as a bunch of real estate agents, two sides of the same coin, but still at the end of the day, like they most of the lenders that I spoke to or have been speaking to over the last couple of days are generally pretty excited about things, and obviously it's more due to just specific rates, but yeah, I again, uh, if there is a recession or whatever, I'm choosing not to participate in
I'm
it.
choosing not to participate. Well, look, what I shared with them, I said, we always have challenges. I said,
Yeah.
that is the constant. We're always having challenges. If it's not that interest rates were really low and we had to go and sell 15 houses before one stuck, now it's the exact opposite. The challenge is still there. It's just a different challenge. And I shared with them, I said, you can't operate the next 12 months like you did in the last 12 months. It's not going to equate. Now, you've heard me share the story about Jim Rohn and his quote about the same wind blows on us all. You've heard me say that. I've used that for years. It's always relevant. It's always relevant. There's never been a time where it's not the blowing of the wind that determines your destination. It's the set of the sail. Never been a time.
Yep.
And this is no different, but people have set their sail based on the last 12 years, and they've gone pretty quickly into the direction that they want to go. Well, I shouldn't even say 12 years. Look, we've been going through some really, really interesting changes since COVID, 2010. Like, that was a bad move, throwing interest rates. They should have just let, in my opinion, they should have just let the whole free market play itself out. Because now the reason why we have this low inventory is, look, you got a sub 3% rate. Why would you want to sell it?
Right.
To go and get a 6% rate, 7% rate, especially because typically when rates go up, prices come down. That hasn't happened. I did this data, and I wish I had my slide deck, but I'll just share the details with you. So since 2019 to currently, the average sales, no, 2004, since 2019, the average sales price versus the 2024, the average sales price in the United States has gone up 41%. 41%. We are now, the National Association of Realtors forecast is that interest rates are going to be 6%. Now, I also looked into how accurate it is. I asked Grok how accurate is the forecast for the last 10 years of NAR, and it could be anywhere between 1% and 19%. So, take that with a grain of salt. Typically, when things are going good, they're really accurate. But when things go south, they're not so accurate.
That's funny.
But here's the thing with affordability.
Were you asking Grok if it was based on their predictions how accurate they were?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, based on their forecast each year at the beginning of the year, how accurate have they been? And pretty much what it is that when things are going well, they're right spot on, but in changing times,
That's funny.
they're off. And that's true with everybody. Any type of forecast is speculation. It is their opinion based on the knowledge and the point of view that they're looking at. They're looking at the same numbers and they're applying meaning to that and guesstimating. Look, I don't really listen to forecasts from NAR. I don't listen to the Home Builders Association. I want to find the people who are outside of real estate and giving their predictions, like money managers and Peter Schiff. Love to hear their side of the point on what's happening in real estate because it tends to be more accurate than not. But with that, when interest rates go up, prices come down, and the leveling pace is affordability. Let's say that somebody's mortgage is, I don't know, like $3,000 a month. When rates go down, prices go up, it's around $3,000 a month. But when rates go up, prices come down, $3,000 a month. That's affordability. Right. The problem with the 41% increase in the average sales price, and the problem with interest rates is that interest rates went up, prices haven't come down, and affordability based on the wages, it's actually declined. So keeping that same period, 2019 to 2024, it's declined nearly 1%. So not only are wages not keeping up with the rate of increase, it's actually going in the other direction. Now you throw on top of the price of goods and services and living going up. What's that mean? I'm
shocked it's not significantly more than that, because it just seems to me from like a general, like broad stroke overview without looking at actual, the numbers, that affordability has just fallen off of a cliff. I mean, you look at some of those maps where it's like the annual, the average income that it takes to be like, to afford a property or middle class, and it's nowhere near the average annual income based off of where people are at. So,
well, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. These are the official government numbers. Right. They cook the books. I also asked Grok.
Fair enough. I thought you were quoting something more.
No, the wages and such.
More believable.
I also asked
people that are choosing to participate in the housing market.
I also asked
people who are still actively searching.
Yeah, I also asked Grok, based if you calculated the rate of inflation of what it was in 1981. I was in North Carolina. There was another speaker there, and his whole talk track was interest rates aren't high. It's a matter of perception. I don't disagree with him on that, but he said that in 1981 interest rates were near 19%. Okay, and so he downplayed the fact that it was 6%. Okay, so here I am. I'm like, that's only one part of the equation. Talk about right. Choosing what you want. Home prices aren't $41,000 either.
$5,000.
Yeah, I looked it up. The average sales price in 1981 was like $42,000.
It took 16% of your income to pay your mortgage, and yeah.
So it's interesting how people want to just pick and choose. I don't disagree. Look, we've been in real estate a long time, but and the highest I saw them were, I don't know, 11%, but the prices weren't almost nearly $500,000 either.
Right.
They were half. Well, in 2019 they were 41% lower. So when interest rates were 11%, I bet you the average sales price was what, $280, somewhere around there.
Right.
Right now, people would be perfectly fine paying double-digit interest rates if the price was $280,000.
Yeah, 100%.
They weren't back then. They were complaining. Yeah. No different than what it is today. But anyways, my message when I was talking to the agents, I was talking to my counterpart, executive within the same organization, but oversees the actual servicing of our affiliated companies. I was talking to her. I said, look, we're the only ones, not the only ones, but the only ones with a really, really a lot of agents with a big stage that's talking to people about generating leads digitally. They need to have their online presence. They need to. Like, if a leader came up to me and he says, well, these people who are 60 years old, they're not going to do it. I said, you know what? I'm going to challenge you on that. See, what you did is you applied your perception to their reality. You're telling me is that someone who's 60 years old, who's been in the business a long time, isn't going to do this, that, and the other because of the reason that you just attached to it.
Right.
And I said, you see, I disagree. I think that people will do what they have to do in order to make the income that they need to make. And if that means learning a new skill or whatnot and implementing something new into their business, I think they'll do it.
Totally.
They might not like it, but you know what? I'm pretty sure they don't like bouncing their checks either. So, choose your pain.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear, people's, assessments of, I mean, it's not, I mean, we've been in the online and social media stuff for a long time. There's not many people, this day and age, especially in, real estate, that are not at least consumers, of media. So, for them to, shift gears slightly to, being a creator, it's not that far of a stretch, but, so surprising that somebody would, somebody in that line of business would come with that viewpoint.
Well, I find that the real estate trainers, coaches, consultants, I find that the talk track has just been the same for at least the last 50 years.
Right.
The Mike Ferry organization was established in 1975. I know that because that was the year I was born. So it's pretty easy to calculate that. And even today, people are talking about going out and door knocking. Even today, people are talking about cold calling. And I'm not, you and I have gone down this path. We're not saying that won't work. It will. But my God, is it going to be a rocky road for you? Talk about picking the steepest hill to climb. Like, how long do you think, look, you get a new agent. How long do you think that it would take from a digital perspective for them to create content, free report, and set up their website, set up a landing page, drop some ads, and start generating leads? You could do that. You think you could get that all set up in a few hours, maybe a few days? Not a few days, but just a day?
Yeah, but like more so than that, like the ability to just pick up your phone and record a video and post it, on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, right?
Well, that's
60 seconds. And then and you're instantly in front of, I mean, even the most now, you don't have to have followers to get views. It's the media has completely changed to the point where you can create one video and get several hundred views. People poo-poo several hundred people. Like getting a video is a a flop or a bad video that they got 200 views on, right? Have you seen how many people were at the event that you were at this last weekend? Speaking at. When you think about that, you're you just had 200 people view your content. That's a lot of doors. Imagine that equating to how many doors you just knocked.
You really just did a Legend of Zelda moment for me, because you're right. So in the North Carolina one, I had maybe 600 people. There were 600 people attending. I probably had, in my room, it was standing room only for the session that I talk about, modern consumer behavior, how to attract people. And I think I probably had a room of maybe 60 people in it.
Right.
And the event yesterday, maybe 100. And it costs several $1,000s to get the room. We had lunch. It was people flew in to speak. And you're right, for several $1,000s, whereas Don't discount. That's 200 people.
Yeah.
Look, it's not, when you and I started in the telephone space 30 years ago, it was typically you call 10 numbers, you get one answer. The conversion rate was you talk to 3 people, you find a lead. You get 3 leads, you get an appointment. You get 3 appointments. It's always a factor of 3 when you're first starting out. Nowadays, God, to get 200 contacts, to get 200 people, to get your message to 200 people, like that's a week's worth of work. And it's not fun work. It's like legit getting your steps in door to door, or flexing your fingers as you dial the number, unless you're gonna go against the TCPA and use an automated dialer, which I've been on the receiving end of that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, it's the capacity for people to be able to get in front of eyeballs, potential prospects, it's insane. And there's the tried and true sphere of influence, knock your doors, do your stuff. I get it. Like, they don't have to learn anything new. They don't have to teach anything new. They don't have to invest in anything. It's just here's the playbook. It doesn't cost us a penny. Good luck.
So I want to let me dive deeper on that SOI, because I've had some thoughts on that. Remember, I'm all by myself with me and my thoughts for an hour and a half in the morning when it's completely dark outside, it's completely quiet. It's very therapeutic. Whether you ruck or not and you put weight on your back, I encourage everyone just to wake up in the morning and get out of the house and just go for a walk when everybody else is sleeping, and it's a Zen moment. It's turned into therapy for me now. So sphere of influence. Sphere of influence used to be defined as a personal relationship, whereas like you and I would be in each other's sphere of influence. We know each other, we like each other, we trust each other. That would be the old definition. That's not the definition anymore. Not in my book. You see, in my book, a sphere of influence is if you're the influencer, you have a bunch of people surrounding me that you can influence. A sphere. So the sphere is a circle. The circle, and you're in the middle point, and you just happen to influence decisions on anyone around them. Just because you have a personal relationship with someone and someone knows you, likes you, trusts you, doesn't mean that you can influence them. So fast forward into 2000. Well, actually, I guess we can't fast forward to 2025. We are in 2025, and we have influencers as a noun, like it's like a real thing. And there's always been a real thing, because people have always there was always a time, even today, that people have a favorite news anchor, a favorite weather person, a favorite actor, a favorite personality on TikTok, YouTube, whatnot. Those guys are influencers. And what's interesting about influencers is that when we start looking at real estate and we start looking just at the core data, we find that the most important thing that buyers and sellers look for in an agent is a reputation of being honest and trustworthy. Yes, knowing that they're in real estate. Yes, being competent. Yes, knowing the market. Those are important, but they're not the number one thing. The number one thing is having a reputation of being honest and trustworthy. So they have to know you, like you, and trust you. But nowhere in the data does it say that you have to know them, like them, and trust them. So it's only a one-way street.
Right.
And to your point, pick up your phone, create a video, because how are they going to get to know you, like you, and trust you to reach out to you if you're not creating that content and giving them that opportunity? Because the other interesting statistic is that 81% of sellers only meet with one agent before they list their home. Well, if we know that people are only working with people who they know, like, and trust, and you're only meeting with one agent, how do they think that that's happening? Right. It's not, it's not in their dreams by any means. They're not hooking up in their dreams. They don't even know they exist. So what you do and help these agents to build out specialty. You're more of a semi-advanced. I mean, if we're grading on the curve here, you're not the place that people go to learn the alphabet when it comes to digital strategies. They at least have to know how to count and add. There's certain criteria. They have to know what social media is. They have to know what hashtags are. They have to have an understanding of how it works. I would think, anyways, you tell me, but I would think that in order for you to actually get them into your program, they have to have some knowledge about how things work.
Generally, some basic usability of like Facebook, and if you can send an email, it's generally a good, and watch a Netflix show. It's usually like a good starting point for most folks. We've actually been embracing some old school stuff and plugging in power dialers and stuff like that for folks to just kind of make things, have some really simple options for a lot of folks too. That's not super, techie or complicated or, next level. Because there's a lot of people that just still like, some old school stuff, and it works, right?
Yeah.
It might not be the most effective and efficient, but there's a reason why it's been around since, for 50 years, right?
The number one activity that I think people need to do that don't do, this is like a lost activity, is physically previewing property. Physically previewing property will give you more knowledge about a market, A, than you ever have. B, it's harder now to get in and preview property if you don't have a showing. But it used to not be that hard. Pre-COVID, that was something that changed during COVID from my perspective, is it was much easier to get in and preview a property without a client than it is now. Typically they want to do a showing, and I totally get it, because back then you didn't have the virtual tours and stuff like that. So I can accept that. But to get out there in the neighborhood and see the house and then look at the research on it, if you are able to preview the property, you have a really good chance of actually meeting one or more of the homeowners there, which could lead to an opportunity if in fact that property expires.
Right.
But it also gives you a tremendous amount of content. We've shared the whole target that I've created about the area, the neighborhood, and the property. And you just brought up, pull out your phone, do a 60-second video. Well, here's an idea. Go out and preview a property, then pull out a phone, record a 60-second video, and give your opinion on the property. If you did that 5 times a day, you're into it 5 minutes of content, and you have, inside of 3 months, you have probably previewed and recorded an opinion on the property and the neighborhood. In 3 months' time, if no new homes come onto the market, you would probably have previewed every single home on the market, and that gives you power. In fact, I just remembered by saying that is that I made a commitment that I have not delivered on. I was going to be doing that. And, this reminds me of how I failed on my fitness journey in 2 days. I made a commitment to myself on July 8th. I failed on July 10th, and I started back over. So, Luke, I'm starting back over. I'm going to do it.
All right. Well,
you do it. I've made this commitment like 5 times.
Yeah, I think it's been a handful of times.
Yeah.
I know you got a lot going on, but I would say if you were actively selling, in the business,
yeah.
I would not doubt in a second that would not be like.
Yeah, you're right. If I was back into production, this is how I came up with these strategies. Yeah. Was when I was in production. I had this little, what was it? The Flip. It was a camera. It was a flip camera. It was bigger than my iPhone. thicker, and it was just, that's what I would use. God, I think back about all the technology that I had, that how easy it is now. It's harder nowadays, but yet it's easier. In some aspects, it's harder, and I think it's harder just because of the level of competition out there. There's just a lot of people doing it because it's easier, but that's the thing, it's easier. So it's interesting. But I'm going to do it. So by this time next week, I'm going to have an update because, if I'm going to do this, I've got to chronicle. Is that a word? Yeah, I got to chronicle my journey, and I'm going to do it with through video. We've talked about that. So I've got to identify my market area. I've got to do the research, and then I've got to walk through it. I'm gonna create a whole demo page too. I got plenty of time. Why not?
Yeah. Squeeze it
People
in
make time
your
for things that are important. People make time for things that are important. So I think this is important. I think this will, I don't know, maybe I'll go back into production. Average sales price is going up. Average where I'm at is 1.7 million. We need to talk about your market too. We're going to do that next time because we're at time. But we need to talk about what's going on in Texas because it continues to be a little bit freaky where you're at, and I want to hear about the first-hand account. All right, so that's it. I will see you next week.
rock and roll.
Bye.